In the studio with us, Mayor Prince. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Oh,
We're good.
yeah. It's a typical late spring-like day, says the meteorologist.
So they lie. I gotcha.
Well, yesterday she said 80. It got way more warmer than 80.
Yeah, it did. It was a good day.
Well, if we didn't have the weather to complain about here in Minnesota, what would we do?
Yeah, that would be a major thing. That's one thing we talked about the other day. One thing we all have in common.
Well,
What's today's weather going to be like?
Well, at least we're not living in North Dakota. Although they might want the population, based on what I heard earlier this morning.
Well, not on a cloudy, Canadian cloudy day.
You know, that's gonna be like a new season, isn't it? Wildfire season, where you can't breathe. It's not good.
Right. Seems like every summer now. Since over the last 3 or 4 years, it just seems like.
You'd think there'd be a better solution to this by now. No, I'm not here to proffer one. I'm just simply saying, at some point, man, we got to figure this thing out.
Well,
You're a solution guy. Come on.
well,
I try to stay within my own jurisdiction, and
stay in your own lane here.
yeah, well, within reason. Sometimes I venture outside of the guideposts here or there, but generally speaking.
Well, some of their fires are in areas that there's not a road to, and it was just caused by lightning.
Well, it depends on if you start, YouTubing this stuff. There's some interesting conspiracies out there. Now, I'm not telling you I subscribe to any of them. I'm just saying it's pretty interesting out there.
Fun rabbit holes to go down.
It is, I don't know what that says when you hop on the YouTube and some of these things show up on your feed, because obviously your feed is customized for you, so it kind of makes you wonder, like, do I inherently, give off the conspiratorial vibe here or what? But yeah.
Algorithms are not wrong.
Well,
Oh,
on
really?
my YouTube, you'd see racing and abandoned cities in North and South Dakota. They've just been coming up for me.
Mine is chock full of city meetings, county meetings, state meetings. It's all government all the time on my channel. That's why when something comes through that's like that, you're like, that's interesting. Maybe that's it. Maybe if you're a government official, everybody kind of thinks maybe there's a little conspiracy there, and that gets in your feed. I don't know. Hard to say.
So what has the city been up to?
We've been pretty busy with a lot of things. Some routine things like the road projects, right? We're working on Taft and Mill, and we're working on Hannah, and going to start the roundabout project over there on Middle School Drive. So 'tis the season of construction, which is good because we need roads. So that's been kind of routine. On the other hand, it'd probably be an understatement to say most people are aware of the gas leak we had downtown here not that long ago, and kind of having to close downtown for a period of time and sorting that out. And, we ended up with stump removal that was going on as a result of the trees that had to be removed because of the issues we were having with their roots and whatnot. And when a contractor was working on stump removal, they hit a gas line, and that's what started the whole thing. So, it's interesting how these things multiply over time, because I was thinking about this, first off, you plant the wrong tree,
Right.
which then causes the issue 30 years later, whatever the number is, that you have to remove the tree. And then in the process of removing the tree, you cut a gas line and so forth. Kind of like building a parking lot over a basement. There's always consequences later. So the reason I bring this up is, like, to me, it's been an odd summer already, right?
Sure.
It's not even summer.
Right. Exactly. It's summer. We got to, go fix that sinkhole. Oh, it turns out we got a whole basement. Let's go remove some stumps. Oh, got a gas leak. So it's been one of those summers. I'm hoping that things will mellow out, but our public works crew responded quickly. Fire department responded quickly. There were contingencies in place. Took a little while to get sorted out, but we did. Everybody was safe. Had a good outcome, but certainly not the call I thought I was going to get at 9 in the morning.
Sure.
So, man, maybe this was even a month ago already. Council met about lead pipe, water pipe.
Yep.
And replacement of said lead water pipe. I found it odd that there are a lot of cities in Minnesota that have no clue what's really underneath their city.
Yeah, and there are still some places we don't know.
Sure.
If you were watching the meeting, fortunately for us, the inventory of what we don't know is very small relative to what we actually have knowledge about. But you are correct. Some cities are very, very old, and the record keeping of what went in the ground when is not particularly good. And you can make some assumptions
Sure.
based on date of construction, but they're all assumptions. So the first part of this for the cities is to take an inventory to determine how much they've got, and then there's a process for applying for state funding and so forth to get this rectified. But if you don't even know what's in your inventory, that's a little hard to do. Yeah. But we're in a good spot, relatively speaking. But yeah.
That takes some foresight. Decades and decades and decades ago. You know what? We should really keep track of this stuff.
Yeah, well, it's well, and now we live in a data age that we take it for granted that we can plop something in a spreadsheet or a program or whatever, and it's stored forever digitally. But back in those days, everything's in writing. And when you hang out with the folks from the Beltrami County Historical Society and start looking back at like even our minutes from say the 60s or 70s, they're all handwritten.
Yeah.
There's ledgers, because that's how accounting used to be done. Right. Handwritten ledgers that are stored. Right?
It's the only way we got Al Capone.
Right. So, like if you want to know some, financial data from the 30s, you might have to go to the Historical Society, blow some dust off the cover, and immerse yourself in a written ledger. So, I have a little compassion and sympathy for that record keeping and not having the foresight, because it wasn't so simple as it is now. And that's before you start talking about natural disasters, fires, tornado. I mean, back then you could literally destroy your records.
Right.
Have a fire, maybe you don't have records anymore. So anyways, we'll see what happens. But I think we're in a good place, sort some things out. Hopefully the state gets moving here and we can get some dollars and start working.
Do they have fake trees that have lights in them already that are indigenous to our area? And we'd never have to worry, and they got lights on them already.
Like a new hybrid tree that you genetically
it's fake.
spliced?
It's fake. But it won't have any roots.
So it's like a tree-like tree.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Spam. The Spam of trees.
It's going to be just like the ones that were up there, but they won't cause problems underneath. And look, we already got the lights built in for Night We Light.
I like it. You are in supreme
Don't have to water
problem-solving
'em.
mode.
You don't have to water them. And then it would be a fun thing as tourists come up. Like, I think those trees are fake. We'll say, they're right.
You come up with the strangest things.
Could be a...
I think if you were gonna do something like that, you got to come up with a better story for the tree. That was like Paul Bunyan's trees that he planted, millennia ago that finally took root, and they're just indestructible like he was. Right, something like that. You need a story.
I like it.
Get tourists up here and tell them about the Loch Ness Monster that's in Lake Bemidji.
Now you're coming up with strange things, Mayor.
It's only because I've only had like 3 sips of coffee. I warned you. I said, take it easy on me out of the gate because I haven't had my coffee yet this morning. And then, Mark's encouraging me here, so you better get back on track.
Okay, you can have your 4th sip.
So there's a roundabout going to start?
Yeah, we're going to do the roundabout that's on Middle School Drive. They're right past Target. So that is kind of where those dental businesses are.
Oh, right there?
Yep. So that's the first one that will go in, and the only one that will go in this summer because of the delay due to the raise grant dollars that got held up and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, that'll be the first roundabout, and the next year we'll finish the rest of the city streets, and then the year thereafter, MnDOT will come in and do the main thoroughfare of Highway 197. So basically, end of 27, that project should be completed, or so we hope.
I am only being slightly sarcastic here. Have you had discussions with MnDOT of having some classes for drivers on how to maneuver all of these said roundabouts? Because I think it's getting worse.
Yeah, I do think, it's my own personal opinion, during the summer it does get worse. And I don't know if that's because we have tourists who don't really know how to drive some of these roads. Is it because we get more recreational vehicles out there? I don't know what it is, but my own personal experience tells me that the summer does seem to be worse. And I don't know, maybe that's a business opportunity for somebody. Roundabout defensive driving.
Right.
It starts with going the right direction on one.
That's the problem. People are too defensive. They stop at all of them.
Really? I always thought the best defense was a good offense, because that's what I see out there. I see people going from the right lane to the left lane, and occasionally I see people going the wrong direction, take you head on.
I've seen that too.
This summer, already twice, I've had traffic coming at me the wrong way on the one-way there on 197, where the Holiday gas station is, right in that area. Like twice already.
Well, I did Google, do they have roundabouts in Iowa? They already have over 150 already built, more planned.
Well, roundabouts seem to be the way of the future. A lot of people really believe that they reduce the intensity of crashes and all of these things, and better flow traffic. And, certainly I've sat through a lot of these engineering discussions, and there are different opinions about it for sure, but it seems to be kind of the way to solve some of these traffic congestions issues, so you're seeing more. I don't know that I fully subscribe to that theory, but that is the theory.
I'm not even close to fully.
I'm being diplomatic this morning.
Saying.
I mean, it's like everything else. I think in some spots, roundabouts have worked really well and they make sense.
Sure.
In other spots, I do cock an eyebrow and go, okay, is this really the best deal? Now, I've been to Europe a lot over the years, so you want to talk about roundabouts. But those folks are very used to those roundabouts, and they go slinging around them like nothing. And they know what lane they're supposed to be in. I'm the tourist in that situation, trying to figure out where I need to be.
They laugh at our roundabouts.
They do. I mean, those folks have multi-lane roundabouts.
Huge.
Huge, gigantic roundabouts. And they have roundabouts that lead to a roundabout that lead to a roundabout that lead to a roundabout. And you better know that, because otherwise you're not getting off on the road you need. And it's a long way back. I've done that a couple times. So, yeah, no.
Meeting this past week, in fact, a couple of days ago, had a lengthy conversation about some funding sources for some housing, which I think everyone who lives in Bemidji knows that that's an issue. Just from your standpoint, not necessarily what the council had all discussed, city's on the hook for $500,000 for part of this project. To me, $500,000 is money well spent in an issue that's this dire. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and especially when it comes down to how that money is spent, because almost the full 500,000, I think our tax incremental finance run came in at like 420. So I mean, those are proceeds of tax payments that would only exist because of the development. So that's entirely different than, hey, we're going to go to the general fund and get $420,000, because that's real cash. It's gone. You can't use it for something else. But when you're able to use the project itself through its future tax revenue to fund the project, which is the whole basis of tax incremental financing, or TIF, that's a win-win. And so that kind of becomes a no-brainer. Because if we're successful with this project, once it's phased out, the first phase is only like 36 units or something, which we desperately need. But over time, once that infrastructure goes in, because that's what the conversation was, the matching dollars to put in sewer, water, and streets so that this can be developed, you could potentially have 900 units there.
Wow.
Well, what would 900 units mean for the city of Bemidji? That would move the needle.
That puts a major dent.
That would move the needle. So
36 doesn't.
Nope, 36 doesn't, but 900 does. But 36 can lead to 900. And you can't get there unless you have the infrastructure. How are you going to do it without roads? How are you going to do it without sewer? How are you going to do it without water? So to me, you're going to get TIF dollars to make this work. You're going to develop it out. You're going to put 36 units in to start, and then keep building it out. Again, there's not a lot of no-brainers that come to you, but for me personally, that felt like one of those. Pretty simple thing. Let's get it done and let's get going.
How long before 900 is a realistic number?
I think you're probably talking, to me, I think if you could do that in a 10-year window, I think you're doing pretty good. But it's like everything else. We're applying for a grant. So will you get the grant from the state? Then you got to green light the roads, and then you got to do those first units. So, I mean, I think if you were hoping to get 900 units in that 10-year-ish kind of window, I think you'd be pretty lucky to do that. But we'll see.
Does 900 units put a dent in things 10 years from now?
Well, it's a piece of everything. That's the whole thing. Like, why are we in the position we're in right now? in part because we didn't have anything in the pipeline. I mean, if we had, we would be in a different situation. So you can't look at one housing project to solve all your needs. You need to get as many housing projects into the works for both today, 5 years from now, and 15 years from now, and everything in between. To me, I think that's one of the things, is having that foresight. If we'd have seen where housing was going 20 years ago, my guess is the city would have taken a much more proactive role in housing. So would the county have. You know, now we're here, so it's about getting proactive, not just for now and in the future. And then to your point earlier, I often think about, well, what are we not seeing? What problem is coming 10 years from now that's developing right now that nobody's seeing? Because that's how you stay ahead of things, and that's hard. It's not easy to project that stuff. But I think about it. And we were talking about AI. I think that's going to be dramatically impactful in our society in terms of how that's all going to roll out. There's a lot of theories about how that's going to go, but if you're going to ask me, like, what's that next thing that's coming that's going to impact us all in every aspect of life, that's probably it, or at least one of them.
How difficult of a decision is putting up $500,000 from the city, regardless of where that $500,000 comes from, with the questions of, there hasn't been a bonding bill that's been passed in forever. The state budget is wonky at best. Just saying, you know what, this is the right thing to do, regardless of how many other question marks there are.
Well, I think it goes hand in hand. I mean, there's certain investments you have to make because the community desperately needs it. And this is where these conversations often go. What's a need and what's a want? Housing is most assuredly a need. So if you're thinking about where you're going to spend $500,000, it definitely, is at the top of the list. Law enforcement is a need. Fire protection service is a need. Other things are more wants. And when money gets tight, just like in your household and my household, what do you focus on? You say, well, I'd like to take a vacation, but probably not this year because I need to fix the roof. I need to fix the car. I need to do something with my kids, or whatever the case might be. So I don't think the city's that different. So when you talk about whether it's $500,000 or $1 million or 10,000, whatever the number is, I think as elected leaders, we're all headed to that place where we're going to have to work much harder on the needs and the wants, because I don't see a ton more money coming from the federal government. I don't see a bunch more money coming from the state. So, that's where we're at. Got to work with what you got. And you can't just keep raising taxes because everybody's being squeezed. You're not in a position where your citizens can be treated like they're an ATM.
Right.
So, got to do the work you can with what you got. But to an extent, that's also why when you're seeing some of those funds available, you need to jump on them and try to grab them, because who knows how much longer they're going to be there. Right now, we're applying for this state infrastructure grant we've been talking about for the housing. Will it be there next year? Will it be there the year after? I don't know. I just know it's there now. I'd say let's go get it.
And that deadline is like Friday, right?
Correct. So I give our city staff and Sandy Henham and the Beltrami County HRA a lot of credit, because these grant application windows open, and they're often very short. They could be 30 days, they could be 2 weeks, and that's the timeline. So you can't realistically throw together a complete project with every I dotted and every T crossed in that window if you're going to apply. So you have to move fast, make your best educated guess that you can, and know that you're going to have some refinement to do when it's all said and done. And everybody's got to take a certain level of comfort in the risk that goes with that. The flip side of it is, well, you just play it 100% safe and you don't apply. So often when it comes to grants, these are the 2 points that you find yourself between. Take a little risk and try to get the money in the community and have to figure some things out after the fact, or play it 100% safe and don't even apply. We're in a place where we're probably close to 1,000 units short of housing. I think that warrants a little bit of risk. Hence, that's why I voted to support it. And I don't think there's great risk here, but it's not zero. Never is.
Right.
Recently had a review on the city manager. What is that process like for the entirety of the staff that works for the city?
So I think you're asking me 2 questions. What do reviews look like for other staff, or what versus how reviews look for the city manager? Is that what you're asking?
You probably can't blanket it all under one, so sure.
Yeah, well, it looks different because really in the city, the majority of employees are covered by union contracts. And those union contracts are negotiated every 3 years. In those union contracts are cost of living increases, step increases, reviews, when they take place, how they take place. All of that is negotiated and in the contract. The department heads that work for the city don't have contracts. They're at-will employees. And the city manager has a contract with the city, but each one of those contracts is unique because every time you hire a city manager, you go into a negotiation, and what's in that contract kind of determines how things roll out. And so certain things that union employees get aren't necessarily guaranteed to the city manager or to department heads. So if we pass, for example, a cost of living increase, which we did at the beginning of this year for all city employees per their contracts, which was 4%, our city manager doesn't automatically get that unless it was written into his contract, which in his case it wasn't. So that's how it kind of looks pretty different. So in the case of our city manager, we have a once a year annual review, and that's what it is. And there's a whole process for how that review is laid out, and that's in the contract, etc. However, as a city council, we can do unscheduled reviews anytime we want. And the unscheduled review can be any way that the council deems that it should be, which, if you think about it, makes sense because the city manager reports to the full city council. If there's something going really well or something that's a real issue, you want the council to have the ability to step in and have the necessary conversations. That's truly what a unscheduled review allows you to do in either direction. And so when we gathered here a couple of weeks ago, I guess it's getting pretty close to a month ago, we did an unscheduled review. And that was actually at the request of our city manager because there were some things that he wanted to talk through with us in regards to goals and objectives. And we also spent some time talking about compensation and those kinds of things. And that's unfortunately just kind of how the process works, because a lot of people ask a lot of questions as it relates to the city manager's performance. And we as city council members have to be very respectful of what we can comment on and what we can't. And unfortunately, then people say, well, you're hiding something, or, or you're not being fully transparent, but it's personnel. And so the only way a city manager review process can ever be public is if the city manager says, I want it public, then it can be. Most city managers are never going to ask for that because you probably wouldn't want your performance talked about in public, good or bad, because it's a private matter. So once the city manager says, I don't want to make it public, then anything that happens in the closed session cannot be discussed publicly. And we all manage the city manager, the 7 of us together. So just a small piece of insight, when we conduct a review, there's a note taker in there with us. And the note taker is typically an attorney. And that attorney will write the summary of what the review was based on everything that happened in the meeting. So I don't author that. Other council members don't author it. An objective third party does. We have a little input on a little bit of wordsmithing, but for the most part, the meat and potatoes is done that way. So when I read the summary at a meeting, the conclusion, it's that process. So then people want to come and say, well, what do you really like about your city manager, or what really bothers you about your city? You know, those kinds of things. I can't comment on that because the 7 of us jointly make that comment.
Sure.
And each of us have our own ideas and opinions and thoughts, of course. But that's the official process. And if I were to step outside that process, I could be subject to discipline, or the city could be subject to liability, neither of which is good. So unfortunately, occasionally I dial into social media and see things, and I've got people saying, well, if you were really transparent, you'd say X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, if I said X, Y, or Z, I'd make you happy, but potentially open us all to a lawsuit, and I might find myself no longer mayor. So sorry, I can't do that.
That's not how it works.
How long has Rich been the manager?
1.5 years. Yeah, it's been 1.5 years.
I've kind of felt bad for him when he was first hired because there were some big things that needed to be done, and he's brand new, and you start any new job, it's going to take you a while to get up to speed. Is 1.5 years a good time frame for he's fully up to speed?
I think it's pretty fair to say he's in a really good spot now. But I will also say that we have had some unique things sort of come out of the blue, as we just talked about.
Right.
And so every time you have one of these things happen, you don't get to do the normal routine, if you will. You have to pivot. And even like carrying the water on a huge project like the YMCA, that's a huge lift for our city staff, and that begins with our city manager. And so it's not every day that the city's contemplating a $60 million development project. That isn't every day. So, when you say a year and a half, not exactly a routine year and a half, because we've had some pretty heavy lifts. Turning and burning last minute on a housing grant twice now. That isn't normal, right? So overall, I think he's very up to speed, despite, carrying some water on some things that are a little out of the ordinary.
And, oh, by the way, maybe an annexation.
Right. Well, there is that too. Yeah. And, to be fair, within the city, there's always some kind of new thing going on. But we've had kind of a convergence of them. And, people might recall that when he stepped in, we were moving from an interim city manager. We were still kind of working on the backside of Red Pine. It wasn't like you stepped into a clean, everything was set and moving forward. So I give him, substantial credit for getting himself, acclimated and working and all of those kinds of things in that environment and moving things forward. I mean, I hate to keep coming back to the YMCA, but I'm like, the city's owned that property for 20 years.
Wow.
Nothing has happened in that 20 years. We're the closest right now to anything happening, and a really good thing for our city.
Sure.
Right? You don't get that done unless you got good staff in the background working it, with Dave, with the YMCA, with all of these folks.
Mayor, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Always happy to come in and visit you on a cold Minnesota summer morning.